So I'm presuming all of you in the audience today went to school. Hopefully that's not too presumptuous. But I would want you to think a little bit about what that school experience was for you. And in this crowd, we will find differing experiences. Also, I'm sure you remember the great teachers and possibly the bad teachers. And you've possibly forgotten those in the middle. And so education is very much about the teachers that form the experience that you have. Societies that prize education are societies that thrive. And schools, even with the multitude of challenge in the construct, are still places that engender learning and becoming. And there are great examples of vibrant places of learning, both in affluent communities and in poorer communities. Geoffrey Canada spearheaded a project called the Harlem Children's Zone in Harlem, where he and his team identified a precinct and made sure that every child in that precinct was given the right tools to be able to succeed from the cradle through secondary education. It was wildly successful as they focused in on education at all the pivotal moments. Great schools planted in or near informal settlements can also do this. And I think about Storavi Boys Center, which is in Nairobi and has produced incredible young men, even by being in and close to a slum. So schools can be places of hope and transformation. High-functioning people systems rely on certain behaviors from those within the system. One such example in South Africa is Discovery Health's Vitality Program. Discovery Health's Vitality Program incentivizes behavior such that you and I will do something to be healthy or to have health checks regularly. And so they've understood how to incentivize that response by creating a reward system. Incentives promote behavior. Positive incentives promote positive behavior. In contrast, systems controlled by regulation and threat seek to engender compliance through fear. Systems that champion fear squash creativity and initiative, unless the creativity is there to get past the system. So learning requires freedom of thought and space for making mistakes and exploring options and opportunities. Regulation and threats are counterintuitive for places of learning. Many education systems are designed around compliance and regulation. Curiosity, creativity, and growth are subdued in this type of context. Regrettably, our South African current education system seems to mirror the version of regulation and compliance rather than a freer version. Imagine if every community, every neighborhood had a school that functioned as a lighthouse. The metaphor of a lighthouse is synonymous with hope, with safety, with life, with order, all the good things. The antithesis of that is a place of disorder, depravity, dilapidation, disarray, and hopelessness. How many schools can you think about and name that function as lighthouses in their communities or in their neighborhoods? Lighthouse schools must be places of safety, of hope, and of life, of promise. Imagine an education system built on incentive rather than on regulation and compliance. In a similar way, that discovery's vitality encourages certain behaviors. Imagine a program for schools, for principals, for parents, for communities that was based on incentives. So if you thought about a graph, you could have as the x-axis milestones and achievements, and then as a y-axis, you could have autonomy and resource allocation. The more achievements and milestones you meet, the more autonomy and resource allocation you could access as a school. In achieving certain milestones, this resource allocation, which would grow, and the autonomy could look something like this. So if you think about an administrative role of a school, number of days your staff or a school staff is present. If you achieve the right number, that would unlock some autonomy in the way that you are able to operate that school. Maintenance of buildings, school fee collection in schools that require fees to be collected. On a curricular basis, you could argue for grades that achieve certain reading levels, that school then is in a position to think about how it applies the curriculum for the following year. And so there's greater autonomy that then gets put in the hands of the principal and the school. If a school operated a co-curricular program in the afternoons, that school would then be allocated greater resource to be able to fund that program and keep it going. With a school that is then achieving these mechanisms, the ability to then craft and chart its own direction is far greater and far stronger. So we could take this further. In certain communities, there could be tax incentives for businesses to invest in their local school. By investing in a program in their local school, they could be able to get some relief. But the more important aspect is that it becomes a community building operation. Everyone buys into the school. This autonomy could afford principals the freedom to choose their curricula that could prepare their school's children with the skills for their local context. If you think about the Midlands, schools in this area could think about hospitality, about tourism, about healthcare, about small-scale manufacturing, about agriculture. And the children leaving those schools would be more job-ready than those that currently leave. Greater autonomy should always be linked to maintaining standards. That could be very important. But autonomy engenders ownership. So as the principal and community take greater ownership of their school, the opportunity for applicable innovation becomes a shared responsibility, with many more educational avenues opening up. One such avenue could, and in my opinion should, be the choice to create more monastic schools, single-sex schools, in our communities. South Africa is riddled with social ills. As a result of poverty and unemployment, layered on a fractured past of migrant labor and the Group Areas Act, our young people are growing up in extreme conditions. Monastic schools, single-sex schools, offer greater opportunities to confront these challenges and instill healthier ways of being. In our area, imagine an Mpopomeni Girls High or a Sweetwater Boys Prep. It would begin to change the narrative around traditional township school spaces. Monastic schools are more successful at addressing many of the burning social issues, given their ability to address teens appropriately per gender. In a 9-year study conducted by the New Zealand Department of Education, where the New Zealand Department of Education wanted to track boys' performance at monastic boys' schools versus boys' performance at co-ed schools, the boys at monastic schools outdid the boys at co-ed schools on every metric. And that was just looking predominantly at academics. And if we think about our context and all the challenges that our children have, if we had boys' schools and girls' schools, we could begin to address some of the issues like fatherlessness. And how do we address that in our communities? Then, if we were able to take this incentivized approach further, we could incentivize the teaching fraternity. We could transform the quality of the recruits into the profession. Once again, countries that have placed teaching as a highly valued profession have been able to operate freer systems because they trust the people in the classrooms. A fairly recent paper out of Stellenbosch University tracked pupil achievement from a cohort of learners taught by teachers who were incentivized by being offered more money for better results. And they tracked that against a group who weren't offered more money. Every teacher who was offered more money produced better results. I know in a bigger system that's very difficult to do, but it speaks to the incentive motive. Positive incentives create positive behaviors. It is my contention that to change the trajectory of public education in our country, an incentive scheme would allow schools and communities to take greater ownership of their schools and be determined to become the schools of choice in their neighborhoods. If we are going to turn the tide, something in the system needs to change. If we continue to do as has been done and as it is continually a top-down regulatory approach, I believe we are missing an important ingredient in creating ownership of those schools. And it is a dream of mine that every community would have a school that operates and stands as a lighthouse.